Across the boundless expanse of the cosmos, beyond the veil that separates realities, there exists a law as old as time itself. Worlds were never meant to touch. Yet in the grand design of existence, even the most fundamental rules can be broken by forces beyond comprehension. In the lands between, where shattered grace and fallen gods left only madness and despair, the Elden ring, that cosmic order made manifest, lay broken. Its fragments, the great runes, scattered across a realm where death and rebirth had become corrupted beyond recognition. The sky itself burned with golden light, a constant reminder of what was lost when Queen Marika shattered the ring. The shattering had consequences far beyond what any tarnished demigod or outer god could foresee. For when a fundamental cosmic order breaks, the ripples travel through dimensions unseen, creating fissures between worlds never meant to converge. In another reality, a world of steel and glass towers reaching toward the heavens, a young man swung between skyscrapers on threads of his own making. Peter Parker, the amazing Spider-Man, defender of New York City, had faced gods and monsters, aliens and demons, yet nothing in his battles alongside the Avengers or his lonely vigils over Manhattan could prepare him for what was to come. It began with dreams, visions of a burning tree, a shattered ring of light, warriors falling to beasts of nightmare-made flesh. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid until, while swinging between buildings in pursuit of a common thief, something tore in the fabric of reality itself. The fissure appeared without warning, a jagged crack in the air before him, rimmed with golden light that seemed to burn the very atmosphere around it. Spider-sense screaming, Peter attempted to change direction mid-swing, but the momentum carried him forward. In that final moment before impact, time seemed to slow. He saw the familiar New York skyline behind him, the life he knew, complications, responsibilities and all, and before him, through the fissure, a twisted landscape bathed in amber light, where a massive tree of gleaming gold towered over all. Then, darkness. When consciousness returned, Peter found himself face down on weathered stone, the familiar weight of his mask still upon his face, small comfort in a world instantly, terrifyingly alien. Rising slowly, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by unfamiliar stimuli, he beheld a vast cathedral-like structure, partially collapsed, open to a sky that seemed aflame with cosmic light. This was the Round Table Hold, once sanctuary for tarnished warriors guided by grace, now abandoned but for a single figure who watched the newcomer with eyes that had witnessed the fall of gods. Another visitor from beyond the fog, the robed figure spoke, voice ancient as the stones around them. Though you bear no mark of the tarnished, nor scent of grace about you, curious, most curious. Peter's quip died in his throat as he took in the enormity of his situation. The walls were adorned with weapons of impossible design, and through the broken ceiling he could see that burning tree in the distance, the same one from his dreams. "Where am I?" Peter finally managed. "And more importantly, how do I get back home?" The robed figure who introduced himself as Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, offered neither comfort nor immediate answers. Instead, he presented Peter with a terrible truth. The barrier between worlds had thinned in the wake of the shattering, and the only power that might return him home lay in the restoration of the Elden ring itself. a task that had claimed countless lives of warriors far more suited to this world than a stranger in strange garb. "The great runes must be gathered," Gideon explained, studying Peter with calculating eyes. "Each held by a demigod, children of Queen Marika who fell to madness when the ring was broken. They will not relinquish their power willingly. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be spared." Peter, ever the optimist, despite all he had endured in his young life, responded with characteristic defiance. "Where I come from, we don't kill, not even gods. There's always another way." Gideon's laughter echoed through the empty hall. "Then you have already failed, Outlander, for in the lands between, death is the only currency of any worth." With little choice but to venture forth, Peter soon discovered that his powers, enhanced strength, agility, and his spider sense, remained intact in this realm. His web shooters, however, contained limited fluid, a resource he would need to conserve carefully. More concerningly, something about this world seemed to dampen his spider sense, making it less reliable, more like whispers than shouts of warning. Guided reluctantly by Gideon's knowledge, Peter set forth from the relative safety of the Round Table hold into the blighted realm of Limgrave. The landscape stretched before him like a fevered dream, rolling hills dotted with ruins, wandering creatures that defied categorization, and in the distance a castle of impossible scale perched atop sheer cliffs. It was in the shadow of the ruins of what once had been a church that Peter encountered his first true denizen of this land, a massive knight atop an equally massive steed, both armored in plates that seemed fused to their flesh. The tree sentinel, guardian of the path, whose sole purpose was to slay any who might seek the power of the Erdtree. Peter's initial instinct was evasion rather than confrontation. Years of experience had taught him when to fight and when to find another path. But as he attempted to skirt the ruins, the knight's helm turned, tracking his movement with unnatural precision. "Well, that's just perfect," Peter muttered to himself as the massive halberd leveled in his direction. "First hour in a new dimension, and I've already made the locals angry." The tree sentinel charged with speed that belied its massive size, forcing Peter to leap high, his enhanced reflexes barely sufficient to avoid the sweeping arc of the halberd. Landing atop a crumbling wall, he assessed his opponent with the tactical mind that had served him against foes both superpowered and mundane. "Hey, big guy," Peter called out, falling back on banter as he often did when nervous. "Love the armor, but has anyone ever told you that horseback riding is way more fun when you're not trying to impale tourists?" The sentinel answered only with another charge, this time angling its weapon to catch Peter even in his elevated position. A desperate leap and a mid-air twist saved him, but the edge of the blade caught his suit, tearing the fabric and grazing flesh beneath. Pain lanced through Peter's side, sharper, more intense than injuries he'd sustained before. Something was different about this world, about the nature of damage itself. Each wound felt more significant, as if his very life force was more fragile here. Realizing that direct confrontation would be suicidal, Peter employed hit-and-run tactics, using his webs to swing between ruins, landing quick blows before retreating. The sentinel, though powerful, proved slow to adapt to aerial attacks. After what felt like hours of exhausting combat, Peter managed to entangle the knight's legs with webbing, bringing the massive steed crashing down. With one final desperate strike aimed at a gap in the armor, Peter found himself victorious, though the knight dissolved into golden light rather than leaving a corpse, a phenomenon that left him disturbed and confused. As the light faded, something remained, a faint glow that seemed to flow into Peter himself. A sudden rush of power, of knowledge without context, filled him. For a brief moment, he understood something of this world's fundamental nature, of the cycle of death and rebirth that governed it. The sensation left him dizzy, disoriented, and somehow stronger than before. "So that's how it works here," he murmured, examining his hands as the golden energy dissipated. "You kill, you get stronger. No wonder everyone's so eager to stab first and ask questions never." With the immediate threat eliminated, Peter continued toward the looming castle. Stormvale, as Gideon had named it, domain of Godric the Grafted, possessor of a great rune that Peter would need if he ever hoped to return home. The journey to Stormvale took him through a land both beautiful and nightmarish. Forests where the trees seemed to whisper secrets to one another, fields where warriors' corpses hung from makeshift crosses, some still moving despite their apparent death. Creatures that defied categorization, some pitiable, others monstrous, all dangerous to the unwary. Throughout it all, Peter maintained his moral code, choosing to avoid conflict where possible, subduing rather than killing when forced to fight. This mercy confused the few lucid inhabitants he encountered, a merchant huddled by a fire who laughed at his restraint, a tarnished who does not kill, or perhaps not tarnished at all. The lands between will break you of such delusions, outsider. The weak show mercy, the strong take what they need. Peter's response was firm. Where I come from, mercy isn't weakness. Power comes with responsibility. The merchant's laughter followed him as he departed. Then your world must be a paradise indeed. Here responsibility died with the shattering. As Peter approached the gates of Stormvale, the immensity of the structure became apparent. A castle built for giants with walls that seemed to defy gravity itself, patrolled by knights and stranger creatures, soldiers grafted with additional limbs in grotesque mockery of natural form. The main gate, massive and heavily guarded, presented an obvious challenge. But a figure hunched beside a side entrance offered another option, a stooped man who introduced himself as Gostock, gatekeeper of a less traveled path into the castle. For one such as you, strange tarnished, the main gate means certain death, Gostock advised, eyes gleaming with an intelligence that seemed at odds with his servile demeanor. Take the hidden path. It is treacherous, yes, but less so than facing Godric's knights directly. Spider sense tingling faintly, Peter sensed half-truths in the gatekeeper's words. Yet with limited options and resources dwindling, he accepted the guidance, slipping through the narrow passage that wound beneath the castle's foundations. The path led him through darkness, through chambers where the walls themselves seemed stitched together from disparate parts, much like the twisted soldiers that populated the castle above. In the depths, Peter encountered horrors that tested both his courage and his convictions. Prisoners driven mad by experiments, their bodies altered beyond recognition, attacking anything that moved with desperate fury. It was in one such chamber, while defending himself against what had once been human, that Peter made a discovery. His webbing, nearly depleted, reacted to the strange energy that permeated this world. When applied to certain crystalline growths that dotted the underground passage, it created a substance similar to his web fluid, not identical, but functional. The discovery brought both relief and a renewed sense of hope. If he could adapt, perhaps he could survive long enough to find his way home. Emerging from the underbelly of Storm Vale into a courtyard strewn with debris and bodies, Peter climbed to a vantage point and surveyed the castle proper. The architecture defied conventional logic, with wings built atop wings, towers leaning at impossible angles, all seemingly held together by the same force that allowed the massive structure to cling to the cliffside. From his perch, Peter observed the patterns of the guards, the weaknesses in their patrols. Despite the madness that had clearly taken hold in this place, there remained a certain order, a hierarchy that he could exploit. Godric himself would be in the deepest part of the castle, surrounded by his most loyal and dangerous servants. Moving with the stealth that had served him against crime lords and supervillains alike, Peter made his way deeper into Storm Vale. His spider sense, though dulled in this world, still provided warning enough to avoid the most obvious dangers. When confrontation proved inevitable, he employed his newfound understanding of the castle's strange crystalline growths to replenish his webbing, restraining foes rather than dealing fatal blows. It was in the great hall, a chamber vast enough to house buildings from his world, that Peter finally glimpsed the horror that awaited. Godric the Grafted, once a demigod, now a monstrosity of fused flesh and limbs. Dozens of arms, legs, and less identifiable appendages had been attached to his form in a mad quest for power, creating a being that was more amalgamation than individual. Around him lay the failed experiments, the bodies of those whose parts he had deemed unworthy of grafting. Some still moved, not quite dead, not truly alive, moaning in agony beyond comprehension. The sight shook Peter to his core, challenging his belief that all beings deserved mercy. "What kind of monster does this?" he whispered, observing from the shadows of a collapsed balcony. "This isn't just evil. This is beyond that." As if sensing his presence, Godric's mismatched head, for even his face had been augmented with parts taken from others, turned toward Peter's hiding place, a voice that seemed composed of multiple voices speaking in horrible unison echoed through the chamber. "I smell you, outsider, neither tarnished nor of this world. Your scent is unique. Your flesh will make a fine addition to my collection." Peter's cover blown, he dropped from the balcony, landing in a crouch before the demigod. Up close, the horror of Godric's form became even more apparent, a patchwork of skin tones, textures, and anatomies that should never have been combined. "You know, I've met some real pieces of work back home," Peter said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Guys who turn people into lizards, guys who drain the life out of you, but this is a whole new level of messed up." Godric's laughter shook the hall, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. "Your world must be gentle indeed if you find my art so shocking. Here, power is taken, not given. I am Godric the Golden of the line of Godfrey. These arms, these legs, the strength of many made mine alone." With shocking speed for his ungainly form, Godric lunged forward, multiple arms wielding axes, swords, and stranger weapons. Peter leaped high, adhering to a column as weapons shattered stone where he had stood moments before. "I'm not here to fight you," Peter called down, though he knew reasoning was likely futile. "I just need the great rune you possess. There has to be a way we can work this out without either of us getting hurt." Godric's response was to tear the very column from its foundation, sending Peter scrambling for new purchase as masonry crashed down around him. The demigod's strength was incalculable, beyond anything Peter had faced before. "The rune of the mighty, my birthright. You are nothing but flesh to be harvested, vermin to be crushed." Godric roared, his voice like breaking glass. "I command thee, kneel!" The battle that ensued pushed Peter to his absolute limits. Godric's multiple limbs attacked from all angles, making defense nearly impossible. Only Peter's enhanced reflexes and spider sense, unreliable though it had become, kept him alive, minute to minute. As the fight progressed, Peter noticed a pattern to Godric's movements. For all his power, the grafted limbs didn't coordinate perfectly. There were moments of vulnerability when the demigod had to rebalance his unwieldy form. Using these openings, Peter landed strikes that, while insufficient to seriously harm his opponent, gradually frustrated and enraged him. "Stand still and die!" Godric bellowed, his attacks becoming more frenzied, less controlled. "I will graft your head to my shoulder so I may listen to your screams for all eternity." In his fury, Godric revealed his most terrible secret. Raising one massive arm, he drove it into the floor of the chamber, connecting to something that pulsed beneath the castle itself. Golden energy flowed up through his limbs, and before Peter's horrified eyes, the demigod grafted a dragon's severed head onto his arm, creating a hybrid of human, dragon, and countless other beings. Fire erupted from the dragon's maw, filling the chamber with searing heat. Peter barely escaped, his suit scorched and smoldering. The battle had reached a new level of danger, one that Peter wasn't certain he could survive. In that moment of doubt, as he clung to a shattered window frame and watched the monstrosity below him prepare another blast of dragonfire, Peter thought of home, of Aunt May, of MJ, of the life he had been torn from without warning or explanation. The thought hardened his resolve. "I'm getting home," he muttered to himself. "And if that means playing by different rules, then so be it." When Godric unleashed his next attack, Peter didn't dodge. Instead, he swung directly into the flames, using his webs to propel himself at unprecedented speed. The fire scorched him, pain unlike anything he had known before searing through his body. But the reckless move caught Godric unprepared, and Peter broke through the flames to land a devastating blow directly to the junction where dragon met demigod. The connection, hastily made and imperfectly joined, proved to be Godric's weakness. The dragon head, partially severed by the force of Peter's attack, hung uselessly, no longer able to channel fire. Godric howled in pain and rage, his remaining limbs flailing in all directions. Seizing the opportunity, Peter targeted each grafted joint in succession, using precision strikes and his webbing to immobilize the demigod's countless arms. With each limb disabled, Godric's power diminished, until finally the once mighty being collapsed amid the ruins of his hall, unable to rise under the weight of his own grotesque ambition. Standing before the fallen demigod, Peter faced a choice that challenged the very core of his beliefs. In this world, Mercy had been portrayed as weakness, death as necessity. To claim the great rune, conventional wisdom dictated that Godric must die. Yet as the demigod gazed up at him with eyes filled with hatred and fear, Peter found he could not deliver a killing blow, not even to a being responsible for such suffering. "Do it!" Godric hissed, his voice now reduced to a single tone. "Take my rune, become as I am, a thief of power. A harvester of strength not your own. The cycle demands it." Peter shook his head, stepping back. "That's not who I am, not even here." Before he could decide on an alternative, a golden light began to emanate from Godric's chest. The great rune itself, responding to the demigod's defeat. The light intensified, blinding in its brilliance, and Peter felt a pulling sensation, as if the very essence of the rune sought him out. When his vision cleared, Godric lay motionless, neither dead nor truly alive, and within Peter burned a new awareness. The great rune of the fallen god had chosen him as its bearer. With the first great rune acquired, though not in the manner he had expected, Peter made his way back to the Round Table hold. The journey was easier now, the creatures of the lands between regarding him differently, some even fleeing at his approach, as if they sensed the power he now carried. Gideon Ofnir awaited his return, surprise evident even beneath his concealing helm. "You live, and you bear Godric's rune, yet you did not slay him. Curious, most curious." "I told you," Peter replied. "There's always another way." The all-knowing studied him silently before responding. "Perhaps in your world. Here, such mercy may yet prove your undoing. The path ahead grows only darker, Spider-Man. The other demigods, Renelar of the full moon, Radon the star-scourge, Rykard Lord of blasphemy. They are not like Godric. They are truly monsters beyond redemption." Peter gazed out through the broken ceiling at the burning Erdtree in the distance, its golden light now somehow resonant with the power he carried within. One step taken on the path home, but many more remained. "Maybe they are monsters," he conceded, "but so were many I faced before. I'll find a way that doesn't cost me who I am." Gideon's laugh was hollow. "Then watch the sky as you travel, Outlander, for the stars themselves have taken note of your coming." Following his gaze upward, Peter saw what he had missed before, a constellation burning brighter than the others, shaped like a spider spread across the heavens. "The pattern changes," Gideon whispered, "and the lands between tremble." The Tarnished, who had witnessed the stranger's arrival, spread word through Limgrave, a man who moved like no other, who could cling to walls and shoot strange webs from his hands. Some called him a champion, others a demon. The finger readers merely smiled their knowing smiles and spoke of threads woven through worlds beyond understanding. Spider-Man stood atop the church of LA, surveying the bleak landscape stretching before him. 3 days had passed since his arrival, 3 days of confusion, wonder, and increasingly desperate attempts to find a way home. The old woman Kayleigh had called a merchant had provided some information about this lands between, but nothing that explained how he'd gotten here or how to return to New York. "The Erdtree calls to all who are lost," Kayleigh had told him, pointing to the massive golden tree dominating the horizon. "Perhaps your answers lie there, strange one." Peter sighed, his mask pulled up halfway as he chewed on dried meat Kayleigh had traded for the wolves Peter had dispatched. The food here was as strange as everything else, tough, gamey, and somehow infused with power that seemed to flow through his veins after eating. "If I can't find a way home soon, MJ is going to kill me," he muttered. "Missed date night again, this time by crossing dimensions, realities, whatever this is." A scream pierced the air from the direction of gate-front ruins. Peter pulled his mask down, his spider sense already humming at the base of his skull. "Never a dull moment," he quipped, leaping from the church roof and swinging toward the sound. At the ruins, he found a young woman cornered by soldiers wearing tarnished armor with strange, mutated features. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and they moved with jerky, almost puppet-like motions. "Hey, 7 against 1 seems a little unfair, don't you think?" Spider-Man called out, landing in a crouch between the soldiers and the woman. The soldiers turned as one, their movements unnervingly synchronized. One raised a rusted trumpet to its lips and blew a sour note. The others brandished weapons, swords, spears, and axes that glinted dully in the strange light. "Not much for conversation, huh? That's okay. I can talk enough for everyone." The first soldier lunged forward with surprising speed, its sword aimed at Spider-Man's heart. Peter dodged effortlessly, webbing the soldier's feet to the ground. "You guys might be scary to the locals, but I've fought the Sinister Six before breakfast." Two more soldiers attacked simultaneously. Spider-Man leapt upward, and the soldiers crashed into each other. He fired web shots at their weapons, yanking them away and flinging them into the distance. "Anyone ever tell you you're a little stiff? Maybe try some yoga." The remaining soldiers circled warily. One threw a dagger that Spider-Man easily dodged, but his spider sense flared intensely as the dagger burst into flame mid-air, splitting into multiple burning projectiles. "Whoa! Magic daggers! That's new!" He twisted in air, but one of the flaming fragments grazed his shoulder, burning through his suit. The pain was shocking, far more intense than it should have been. Peter landed awkwardly, clutching his shoulder. The wound pulsed with an unnatural fire that seemed to spread through his veins. Okay, that's definitely not regulation weaponry. The woman he'd been protecting darted forward, pulling a small golden flask from her belt. "Quickly, use this, Tarnished." Peter caught the flask she tossed him. The liquid inside glowed with golden light. Trusting his instincts, he swallowed a mouthful. Immediately, warmth flooded his body, and the burning pain in his shoulder subsided. "Thanks for the magic potion. Now stay back." But the woman didn't retreat. Instead, she raised her hand, and glowing sigils appeared in the air. A moment later, a beam of golden light shot from her palm, striking one of the soldiers. It crumbled to ash with an unearthly wail. "Or you could do that," Peter said, impressed. Together they made short work of the remaining soldiers. Peter webbed and disarmed while the woman, clearly some kind of sorceress, finished them with her golden light. When the last one fell, the woman turned to him with curious eyes. "You fight unlike any Tarnished I've seen," she said. "My name is Melina. I've been watching you since you fell from the sky." "I'm Spider-Man, and I didn't exactly fall, more like got yanked through some kind of portal." Melina nodded as if this made perfect sense. "The boundaries between worlds grow thin as the Erdtree weakens. You were called here for a purpose. No offense, but I've got plenty of purpose back home. People who need me." I need to find a way back. Perhaps. Or perhaps your coming was foretold. Melina's eyes, one of them sealed with what looked like a tattoo, studied him intently. The Golden Order is broken. The demigods battle for the shards of the Elden Ring, and the lands between fall deeper into madness. A champion from another world may be exactly what is needed. Peter's retort died on his lips as a massive shadow passed overhead. Looking up, he saw a dragon, an actual, real-life dragon, soaring above them. Its scales gleamed like burnished gold, and its wingspan must have been 100 feet across. "That's a dragon," he said lamely. "A Geel. He hunts these lands." Melina seemed unfazed. "He is but one of many dangers you'll face if you seek the path to your world or to the Erdtree. Look, I appreciate the save back there, but I'm not some prophesied champion. I'm just a guy from Queens who wants to go home." Melina smiled enigmatically. "Yet you bear power beyond ordinary men. You move as if gravity itself bends to your will. Your webs bind where chains would break. Perhaps you are more than you know." Before Peter could respond, his spider sense flared again, but differently this time, a slow, building pressure rather than an immediate threat. The ground began to tremble. "Something's coming," he warned. "Something big." Melina's expression darkened. "Tree Sentinel. He patrols these lands, slaying all tarnished he encounters. We must go." But it was too late. Cresting the hill came an enormous knight in golden armor atop a heavily armored steed. The knight's helmet was fashioned in the shape of a tree, and he carried a halberd that glowed with the same golden light as Melina's magic. "Okay, that guy definitely skipped leg day," Spider-Man quipped, though his mouth had gone dry. Even at a distance he could feel the power emanating from the knight, a crushing weight of authority and violence. "You cannot defeat him," Melina warned. "Not yet. Even experienced tarnished fall before the Tree Sentinel." "Maybe not, but I can distract him while you get away." Peter flexed his wrists, checking his web shooters. "I'm good at being annoying. Just ask any New York supervillain." The Tree Sentinel had spotted them. His massive steed reared, and he pointed his halberd directly at them. Then he charged, the earth shaking beneath the horse's hooves. "Go!" Spider-Man shouted to Melina, leaping into action. He fired webs at the Sentinel's helmet, aiming to blind him, but the webs sizzled and burned away upon contact with the golden armor. Switching tactics, Peter shot webs at nearby ruins, using them to sling himself in a wide arc around the charging knight. "Hey, Goldenrod, over here!" The Sentinel wheeled his mount with surprising agility, tracking Spider-Man's movements. The halberd swept through the air, narrowly missing Peter as he twisted away. "Missed me. For a big guy, you're pretty slow." The taunt died as the halberd suddenly glowed brighter and released a wave of golden energy that caught Peter mid-swing. The impact sent him crashing through a crumbling wall, his body screaming in pain. This wasn't like fighting Doc Ock or Rhino. The Sentinel's power seemed to reach beyond physical damage, affecting something deeper. Peter struggled to his feet, his vision blurring. The knight charged again, halberd poised to run him through. Spider-Man fired webs at the ground beneath the horse's hooves, creating a sticky trap. The steed's front legs caught in the webbing, causing it to stumble, but it did not fall. The Sentinel compensated perfectly, using the momentary loss of momentum to swing his halberd in a devastating arc. Peter barely managed to leap over the blade, feeling its energy singe the soles of his feet through his suit. He landed on a nearby pillar, breathing heavily. "Okay, new plan. Don't get hit again." The sentinel extracted his mount from the webbing with methodical efficiency, then turned to face Spider-Man again. This time, he raised his halberd skyward. Golden light gathered at its tip, coalescing into what looked like a miniature sun. "That can't be good," Peter muttered. The sentinel brought the halberd down, and the gathered energy exploded outward in a shockwave that demolished everything in its path. Peter leapt, twisted, and fired a webline at a distant tree, but the edge of the shockwave caught him, sending him tumbling through the air. He crashed into the ground near a thicket, his body aflame with pain. Through blurred vision, he saw the tree sentinel advancing methodically, in no hurry now that his prey was wounded. "Spider-Man!" Melina appeared beside him, helping him to his feet. "This way! Quickly!" She led him into the thicket, which concealed a narrow ravine. They squeezed through, the sounds of the sentinel's approach growing louder. "He'll tear these trees down to reach us," Peter warned, limping alongside her. "Not here," Melina replied. "These trees are blessed by the Erdtree itself. Even the sentinel respects their boundaries." Sure enough, they heard the knight stop at the edge of the thicket. After a moment, there came the sound of his steed turning away, hooves fading into the distance. They emerged on the other side of the ravine into a small, peaceful glade. A pool of clear water reflected the light of the Erdtree, and small, luminous flowers grew along its banks. "Drink," Melina instructed, guiding Peter to the pool. "These are sacred waters." Peter removed his mask and cupped the water in his hands. It tasted sweet and clean, like nothing he'd ever experienced. Immediately, strength flowed back into his limbs, and the burning pain from the sentinel's attacks subsided. "What is this place?" he asked, looking around at the serene glade. "A place between," Melina said cryptically, "like you." She settled beside him at the water's edge. "You now see the power of those who rule these lands. The demigods who possess the great runes are far stronger still." Peter replaced his mask and sat back against a tree. "I'm starting to think getting home might be more complicated than I hoped." "The borders between worlds are strongest at the roots of the Erdtree," Melina said. "If you seek a way home, that is where you must go. But the path is guarded by those who would destroy anyone seeking to approach the Erdtree. Like our golden friend back there. He is merely a sentinel. The true guardians are the shard-bearers, demigods who each hold a fragment of the Elden ring. They have been locked in stalemate since the shattering, none powerful enough to defeat the others, none willing to relinquish their claim." Peter looked at her intently. "Why are you helping me?" Melina smiled sadly. "I seek my own purpose in these lands. I believe our paths may run together, at least for a time." She hesitated. "There is another who might help you, a great sorcerer who studies the spaces between worlds. Selen is her name, and she was once a master at the Academy of Raya Lucaria." "Great, let's go see her then." "It will not be simple. The Academy is sealed against outsiders, and the way is guarded by many dangers. And Selen, she has fallen from grace. Finding her will require traversing Liurnia of the lakes, beyond Stormvale Castle." Peter stood, stretching his recovered limbs. "Let me guess. Stormvale Castle is full of things that want to kill me. It is ruled by Godric the Grafted, a demigod and shard-bearers. He grafts the limbs of those he defeats to his own body, seeking the strength he was denied by birth. That's disturbing and gross. This is the nature of the lands between since the shattering, beauty and horror intertwined, death alongside rebirth. Peter gazed toward the distant Erdtree, its golden light casting long shadows across the land. In New York, he'd always known who the bad guys were, what justice meant. Here, everything seemed wrapped in layers of ambiguity and ancient conflicts he barely understood. If getting to the Erdtree means finding a way home, then that's where I need to go, he said finally. And if helping people along the way is part of that journey, well, that's what Spider-Man does. Melina regarded him with her strange, mismatched eyes. You may find that helping people has different meanings in the lands between. Not all who suffer wish to be saved, and not all monsters were born as such. I'll figure it out as I go. I always do. Peter helped Melina to her feet. First stop, Stormvale Castle. But I'm going to need more information about what I'm up against. There is a map fragment nearby that will show you the way, Melina said, and we should seek out the sites of grace, points where the Erdtree's blessing touches the land. They will restore your strength and serve as beacons on your journey. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, Peter looked back at the peaceful glade one last time. For all its danger and strangeness, there was an undeniable beauty to this world, a primal power that resonated even with the scientific part of his brain. With great power comes great responsibility, he murmured to himself, repeating Uncle Ben's words that had guided him for so long. I guess that applies even in the lands between. The sun was setting as they emerged from the thicket, casting the landscape in deep red and gold. In the distance, Stormvale Castle rose against the darkening sky, its spires twisted like gnarled fingers reaching for the Erdtree above. Spider-Man and Melina set off across the twilight fields, two small figures in a vast and ancient land, moving toward challenges neither fully understood, but both somehow knew they were destined to face. Torment clawed at Gwyn's mind as he sat upon his ancient throne. The Lord of Sunlight, once magnificent, now a hollow husk of former glory, his kingdom crumbling, his legacy fading. The first flame, source of all order in the world, was dying, and with it, the age of fire would end. The Lord's gaze fell upon the intruder who had fought through his black nights to reach the kiln of the first flame. But this was no ordinary warrior of Lordran. This was something different. So you've come, Gwyn's voice echoed through the chamber. Another soul seeking to prolong the age of fire, or perhaps to usher in the age of dark. Peter Parker stood before the fallen deity, his red and blue suit torn and scorched from countless battles. The once vibrant spider emblem on his chest now caked with the blood and ash of the lands between. The journey had changed him. The spider had become the hunter. I just want to go home, Peter said, his voice ragged. But I won't leave this world in darkness. 3 months had passed since Peter Parker had been pulled through the dimensional rift into this world of endless death and rebirth. 3 months of adapting, of learning, of becoming something more than just the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. After defeating Malekith and claiming his trophy, Peter had discovered the truth. The great Erdtree that dominated the landscape was merely a parasite, feeding on the essence of an even greater force, the crucible of life itself. And behind it all stood the greater will, a cosmic entity that had imposed its order upon this realm. Just as the tarnished were drawn to the Elden ring, Peter realized he had been summoned for a purpose. The spider sense that had guided him through this nightmare was more than just his power. It was the world itself calling to him, recognizing something within him that could break the cycle. As Peter stood before Gwyn, memories of his journey flashed through his mind: the blood-soaked fields of Limgrave, the poisonous swamps of Caelid, the golden halls of Lendel. He had died countless times, only to awaken at the nearest site of grace, the cycle of rebirth that had driven so many tarnished to madness. Yet each death had taught him something new. "I've seen what happens when people with great power refuse to use it responsibly," Peter said, recalling the words of his uncle. "This world is broken, and I can't just walk away." Gwyn rose from his throne, his once divine form now withered and hollow, a shadow of his former glory. "You speak of responsibility, outsider. I sacrificed everything to maintain order. My kingdom, my children, my very soul, all to keep the darkness at bay." Peter's spider sense flared as Gwyn's hand burst into flame, the Lord of Sunlight drawing his great sword. "And I will not let some interloper from beyond the veil undo what I have built." The battle was cataclysmic. Gwyn moved with the speed and ferocity of a god, but Peter was no longer just Spider-Man. He had become a true warrior of the lands between. His spider sense, now attuned to the very fabric of this world, allowed him to anticipate Gwyn's divine attacks. Peter leapt and spun through the air, firing webs to restrict the Lord's movements. He had learned from his battle with Godfrey, first Elden Lord, not to rely solely on strength. From Radan he had learned endurance, from Malenia, precision, from Rykard, ruthlessness when necessary. As they fought, the chamber trembled, reality itself seeming to warp around them. In a desperate move, Gwyn summoned lightning that shattered the floor beneath them, sending them both plummeting into the abyss below. They crashed into an ancient chamber, far deeper than any Peter had explored before. The walls were inscribed with runes older than the Erdtree, older even than the greater will's influence. At the center stood a cracked primordial vessel, the true Elden ring, the original order of the world before it had been corrupted. "You understand nothing," Gwyn gasped, struggling to his feet. "The Erdtree, the greater will, these are but recent masters of this realm. Before them were others, and before those still more. An endless cycle of gods and their ages." Peter's enhanced vision, now infused with the power of runes he had collected, could see the truth in the inscriptions. This world had been caught in cycles of rebirth and destruction for eons, each cosmic entity imposing its will upon the land, only to be eventually replaced. "Then it's time to break the cycle," Peter said, his resolve hardening. With newfound purpose, Peter fought with everything he had learned. His webs, now infused with the power of the runes he had collected, bound Gwyn's limbs. The Lord of Sunlight roared in defiance, his sword cleaving through Peter's defenses and drawing blood. But Peter had endured worse. The poison swamps of Caelid, the lake of rot, the frigid peaks of the mountaintops of giants. Each trial had forged him anew. With a final desperate effort, Peter executed a move he had learned from observing millennia, a perfect parry, followed by a devastating riposte. His hand, wrapped in webbing hardened by the power of runes, plunged into Gwyn's chest, extracting the Lord's soul itself. Gwyn fell to his knees, his flame dimming. "What will you do now, Spider? Light the flame and continue the age of fire, or let it fade and usher in the age of dark?" Peter looked at the soul in his hand, then at the cracked Elden ring before him. Neither choice felt right. This world had suffered enough under the rule of gods and their arbitrary ages. "Neither," Peter said firmly. "I'm going to fix what's broken." Drawing upon everything he had learned about the fundamental nature of this world, Peter approached the Elden ring. He could sense that it was more than just a physical object. It was a framework, a set of rules that governed reality itself. And rules could be rewritten. Using the power of Gwyn's soul and all the great runes he had collected throughout his journey, Peter began to repair the Elden ring, but not to its original state. Instead, he reshaped it, removing the influence of the greater will, the Erdtree, and all other outer gods who had manipulated this world. As he worked, the chamber began to shake violently. The very fabric of reality strained against what Peter was attempting. No mortal, not even a tarnished hero, had ever dared to reshape the fundamental order of the world. But Peter Parker was not of this world. His perspective was unique, unburdened by the dogmas and fatalism that had trapped the people of the lands between in their endless cycles. The remaking of the Elden ring released a shock wave of power that spread across the entire realm. The Erdtree shuddered, its golden light fading not into darkness, but transforming into a softer, more natural glow. The sights of grace flickered and changed, no longer tools of manipulation by higher powers, but true anchors of hope. Across the lands between, the undead curse that had plagued the population began to lift. Those who had been cursed to endless deaths and rebirths finally found peace. The madness that had infected so many began to recede. Peter collapsed to his knees, exhausted beyond measure. The Elden ring, now reforged, hovered before him, pulsing with a balanced light that was neither the harsh gold of the greater will nor the ominous darkness of the void. "What have you done?" came a voice from behind him. Peter turned to see Melina, her one visible eye wide with wonder. "I broke the cycle," Peter said simply. "This world doesn't need gods or lords. It needs balance." Melina approached cautiously, examining the transformed Elden ring. The age of fracture, the age of order, the age of stars. All the potential futures we imagined were still just variations on the same theme. But this is something entirely new. "I'm calling it the age of responsibility," Peter said with the ghost of his old humor. "Seemed fitting." The ground began to shake again, but this time it was different. A dimensional rift, similar to the one that had brought Peter to this world, began to form near the remade Elden ring. "The boundaries between worlds are healing," Melina said. "The natural order is reasserting itself. This is your way home, Spider-Man." Peter looked at the portal, then back at the transformed lands between, visible through the crumbling walls of the ancient chamber. The sky was clearing, the sickly gold light of the Erdtree replaced by natural sunlight. "Will they be okay?" Peter asked, thinking of all those he had met on his journey. Bled, Rani, Alexander, and so many others who had suffered under the weight of divine machinations. "You have given them something they have never had before," Melina replied. "A world without the domination of outer gods, a chance to forge their own destiny. It will not be easy, but it will be theirs." Peter nodded, satisfied. He took one last look around, then stepped toward the portal. As he did, the remnants of rune power within him began to fade, returning to the land where they belonged. The dimensional rift swirled before him, showing glimpses of New York City beyond, home. After so long, after so much suffering and growth, he was finally going home. "Wait!" Melina called as Peter was about to step through. "In our legends, there is a prophecy about a being from beyond the fog who would reforge the world. We thought it spoke of the tarnished, but perhaps it was always about you." Peter smiled beneath his tattered mask. "I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, even when the neighborhood gets a little expansive." With that, he stepped through the portal, feeling the familiar pull of dimensional travel. Behind him, the lands between continued their transformation, free from the manipulations of higher powers for the first time in millennia. Peter emerged on a rooftop in Manhattan, the portal closing behind him with a flash of light. The city sprawled around him, noisy, chaotic, polluted, and wonderfully perfectly normal. No dragons soaring overhead, no abominations lurking in the alleys, no cosmic trees dominating the skyline. He checked his body, finding that while his suit remained torn and damaged, the wounds he had sustained in the lands between had healed. The runes that had marked his flesh were gone, though he could still feel some echo of their power within him. His phone, miraculously still in a pouch on his belt, showed that only 3 hours had passed in New York since his disappearance. 3 hours here, 3 months there. Time moved differently between the realms. As Peter swung through the familiar canyons of skyscrapers, he felt both unchanged and fundamentally transformed. The lessons of the lands between, about power, responsibility, cycles, and breaking them, would stay with him forever. He landed on the ledge of his apartment building, slipping in through the window. Everything was exactly as he had left it. Dishes in the sink, research papers scattered across his desk, a half-eaten sandwich growing mold in the corner. Peter collapsed onto his bed, the exhaustion of months finally catching up to him. As he drifted off to sleep, he wondered if anyone would believe him if he told them where he had been. Probably not. Some experiences were too profound, too personal to fully share. In his dreams, he saw the lands between one last time, the fields of Limgrave green and vibrant, Lendell rebuilding without the shadow of the Erdtree, the people beginning to live rather than merely survive. He saw Melina standing at the base of where the Erdtree had been, now replaced by a normal living tree, massive still but natural, a part of the world rather than its dominator. "Thank you, spider of another world," her voice echoed in his mind. "May you find peace in your realm, as you have brought to ours." When Peter awoke the next morning, he felt different. The spider sense that had guided him through both New York and the lands between seemed sharper, more attuned not just to danger but to the underlying patterns of the world. He stretched, feeling muscles that had been strengthened by countless battles against gods and monsters. On his desk, he noticed something that hadn't been there before, a small, crystallized tear, similar to the larval tears he had found in the lands between. A token, a memory, proof that it hadn't all been a dream. Peter picked it up, feeling its weight in his palm. Then he carefully placed it in a drawer for safekeeping. Some adventures changed you forever, left marks that couldn't be seen but would never fade. He donned a fresh Spider-Man suit and stood at his window, looking out over the city. New York had its own monsters, its own challenges, its own cycles of violence and heroism. But after what he had experienced, Peter felt more prepared than ever to face them. "With great power comes great responsibility," he murmured to himself. It had always been his creed, but now those words carried the weight of worlds. Spider-Man leaped from the window, shooting a web to swing between buildings. As he soared through the air, he thought he caught a glimpse of something impossible, a flash of golden light, like a sight of grace, atop a distant skyscraper. But when he looked again, it was gone. Perhaps the boundaries between worlds were thinner than anyone realized. Perhaps the age of responsibility he had helped create in the lands between would influence his own world in subtle ways. Or perhaps some experiences were so profound that they changed how you saw everything around you. Whatever the truth, Peter Parker had returned home, changed, but unbroken. Spider-Man had faced the gods themselves and emerged victorious. And somewhere, in a realm beyond the fog, a world continued to heal, free at last from the cycles that had bound it. As he swung through his city, Peter smiled beneath his mask. Every world had its challenges, its darkness. But after journeying through the lands between, he knew with absolute certainty that light could always be found, that cycles could be broken, that a single person with the will to act could change everything. And that was a lesson worth bringing home.